Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Happy days because you will see sitting across from me, making his third appearance on the channel. Preeminent now, the number one football finance. He's kind of you're like Ben Johnson in Soul, like tearing away from everybody else. Kieran Maguire, welcome back, Kieran. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm managing to cope with lockdown reasonably well. All of my teaching's being done remotely, online, which, if you are an undergraduate student, is of course a preference because you don't have to get out of bed.
I remember in my third year of uni, I only had to go in for one day a week or something. I was virtually working full time in my third day of uni, but there you go. Kieran, since we last spoke, I don't think the podcast had started. I think we spoke at the start of the season, and the podcast, the Price of Football podcast, started. It started in autumn, some sort of time.
Yeah, I think we started mid to late September.
So
Yeah,
tell us about the podcast, because it's you and I go quite deep, but the podcast is good in lots of respects, but it's kind of bite-sized chunks twice a week, isn't it?
that's right. I was approached by somebody from BBC Five Live about doing a show, and I said, I I just don't think anybody's be interested in it, and I don't think that I'm the right person to do it because I'm not a professional broadcaster. So I had a meeting with him, and we said, well, let's try to get somebody to sort of formally host it, to ask all the questions, a bit like the role that you play here. So I think originally we were going to go for Justin Morehouse, because at the time I was living in Manchester, but I was also planning to move because our first granddaughter had just been born, so we wanted to be close to family. So I was moving back down to Sussex. So I approached Kevin Day on Twitter completely randomly.
You didn't know
And
him?
said, didn't know him at all, no. And just said, any chance of you wanting to get involved with this? And Kevin very kindly sort of said, I'll give it a try. Yeah, and I could sense that he was wary because A, he didn't know who I was, and B, the thought of a show on football finance inherently sounds incredibly dull. But we started in September. Originally, it was just once a week, and then we decided to have a listeners' question show as well. And again, I just didn't think there'd be any interest in it. But it's gone from strength to strength. So we're now broadcasting twice a week. I think we get 30 to 40,000 downloads a week. I mean, I've got no idea if that's good or bad.
Oh,
But,
that's very good from a
yeah.
YouTuber's point of view. Yeah.
Um, and it seems to have gone down reasonably popular. We get an awful lot of attention from the football industry itself. I'm fully aware that some managers listen to it. I know the crew manager, he name checked us in the Guardian. So we get chief executives following us because we now get follow up emails from clubs, which we've never sought. We are just two old blokes grumbling. We sort of
Kieran,
try to do it.
what's the nature of those emails? Are they questioning stuff you said, or are they saying thank you for explaining it in layman's terms? What's the nature of those emails?
It's 50-50. Some clubs are a bit upset, but all I do is I just generate facts. As an academic, I pride myself on research. That's the nature of what we do, and I just play with a spreadsheet. So some of the clubs say, well, yeah, we think that information's out of date. I say, well, it's in your most recent account. Sometimes they'll query the numbers, but in the main, I think we've proven ourselves to be independent. We've had a couple of offers from media organisations to buy us out, and we've turned them down just because sort of myself and Kevin we're a pair of old punks going back from the 70s, and we sort of like the idea of sort of the fanzine mentality, and having full editorial control. So
Yeah, as soon as you go that way, you're going to be accused by all and sundry of, oh, well, that person is linked somehow by 8 degrees of separation to that guy. Oh, he's on the board at that club, so they're whitewashing. Oh, Kieran never says anything bad about X club, right?
That's right. So, I guess I think we're certainly liked by some of the players. I believe quite a few players do listen to us, especially in the lower leagues, because we try to cover all the divisions, including non-league, including even the likes of Worksop Town when they lost their ground, because our view very much is sort of old football romantics that a football club is part of your identity. It's the beating heart of a community. It does so much good in providing an outlet for people who otherwise wouldn't even get out the house. You think about pensioners who once a fortnight they go and they have their one pint before the match. They go and watch the match. They go and they speak to the same people. It's actually, football is an amazing social vehicle. And I just do the numbers on it.
Fantastic. You say you're not a professional broadcaster, but obviously you're a lecturer, so you're used to presenting these ideas, in a vaguely entertaining way to keep your students happy. Would you be able to do all this stuff without your lecturing background?
I guess not. I mean, if you can teach pensions for 6 hours a day, pension legislation, pension accounting.
I'm self-employed. I don't know what one is.
And still have some people awake at the end of the day, then I guess that helps. It is sort of, the shows are they are scripted in the sense that we have a running order, just like you and I have today, and I think that helps me because it means I can go away and do my research. I don't feel comfortable in front of a camera. It's not me. I'm a very, very antisocial person inherently, but teaching is sort of gets me out in front of all of this.
And also, since we last spoken, the book came out. Do you know what? The last 2 times we've spoken, it's been, I've got this done, I've got this many words to do, and I've got 2 hours, 2 hours less sleep if I go and write some more. So I remember you were in the throes of finishing it off a couple of times ago. How has the book gone down? How is it to be an author? That's awesome, isn't it? And are there any plans? Have you written everything about football finance now, or is in the next 2 days will there be enough stupid things go on that you could write another 10 books?
Well, in football, you're never actually short of stories from a financial point of view. The book was. It was a labour of love. As far as I was concerned, I was just writing it for my students because there wasn't a formal textbook on football finance out there. So, the students kept saying, what are we supposed to do? So I'll go around, I'll do it for you. And then it was finished, I think, around about the time of our last interview, and it took about another 4 or 5 months of proofing, and then things were happening in terms of Bury and Bolton and so on. And the trouble is, it's a bit like painting the Forth Road Bridge. There's never an appropriate finish point for something of that nature. But it finally came out on January the 16th. It is as we speak. It is number 1 in Amazon in sports books because I was hoping for an audience of non-academic people, and it was initially priced as an academic textbook, which all academic textbooks are expensive. So I think initially it came out as 22, 23 quid, and I was going with it. Nobody's going to buy it. So I've managed to persuade the publishers to knock the price down to £9.99, and also I've taken the view that I've never received a royalty check in my life. So therefore, I won't miss one. So all the royalties from the book go to the Trussell Trust, which is the country's leading food bank charity. They do amazing work, and if I can help in a small way, then so be it. So it's sold really well. All the reviews are 5-star, which is flattering. I'm not sure that it's deserved. The audience are very invested in the book because they will contact me with typos and suggestions and so on. So I've just had a reprint, which is actually sitting behind me, and in the reprint, all the typos have been addressed, and there's been 1 or 2 very small tweaks. Is there room to write another one? I don't know. I think sort of an update every couple of years to take into consideration the latest developments in football would make sense. I have thought about writing a book on all of the wrongs in football finance, all of the crazy stories of the clubs that have taxi sponsors who don't own any taxis and things of that nature, which provide the sort of more of the entertaining element of the stories that are run with Kevin.
Along come the Sheffield Wednesday fans in the comments. Brilliant. Here we, here we go. No, but congratulations on it. If you just see over Kieran's right shoulder, I can see it there. The price of football. So yeah, I know you're a straight up guy, Kieran, but you know the classic move, isn't it? On a big selling book, about 18 months later, just a new forward, a new cover, out it goes again.
Change the title.
Change the title, yeah. The price of football 2. There we go. But no,
Yes.
Congratulations on some much-deserved success. I feel quite badly for you sometimes when I see you interview because you never actually get to talk about football. You always end up, in the weeds within 2 minutes of a show or a podcast. So let's talk about Brighton for a quick minute because you're a home and away Brighton fan, in fact. So a couple of questions for you just so you can talk about football. Obviously, I'm a long-suffering Ipswich fan. So how is Adam Webster getting along?
Well, he's our record signing, so I think there were a lot of expectations on him. He's had a mixed season. At times, he looks really classy. Certainly, he is very much a product, or he's designed for Potterball. So Graham Potter encourages the defenders to bring the ball out. He is actually also responsible for Liverpool winning the Premier League this season because he went on a 40-yard run at the Etihad, and the only way he was stopped was when the City centre half Aymeric Laporte.
Right.
Laporte. Well, Laporte came rushing in to try to stop him because he'd sort of gone through past 3 players. Laporte desperately tried to catch up with him and did his cruciates in making the tackle on Adam Webster. And Laporte is an amazing defender, and City have suffered ever since. So I think Anfield should be celebrating Adam Webster this season for the assistance he's given them. He looks really good on the ball. On the downside, he goes to sleep occasionally, and in the Premier League, you will get caught out. So he's been dispossessed on a couple of occasions, which has cost us goals. He's given away penalties where he's been dawdling on the ball in the box, and he got dispossessed, I think, by Tammy Abraham when we were at Chelsea, and then he chopped him down. So he's not won the crowd over, and they're a hard bunch, the Brighton. Yeah, there is an expectation that if you sign somebody for £20 million, he's a finished product. And I don't think Adam is quite there yet, but he's certainly got a lot of promise. With Ben White, by all accounts, ripping up trees at Elland Road. I think the aim is to bring Ben back, and the way that Brighton have nurtured his career, sort of going through, starting off at Newport, then Peterborough, then Leeds. I think the aim was to bring him into the first team squad next season. So it will be really tough. Adam's done well to keep Shane Duffy out of the team. So he's clearly got the faith of the manager. I think next year it could be Adam Webster and Ben White as our 2 centre halves, because there's lots of stories about Lewis Dunk moving on. Lewis has been our best player of the season this year. He's been sensational.
I saw Ben White's first game for Leeds at Bristol City, and like most people, when Leeds sold Janssen to Brentford, I was like, oh, okay, not so sure about that. And then White came in, and never heard of him. So I rock up at Bristol City for the first game, and we know that he's going to have had 7,000 instructions and diagrams given to him, and he's probably lost, I don't know, 20% body fat from 1 month with Bielsa. And after about 20 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, who's this guy? So yeah, we got a lot of Leeds fans, obviously being a Championship channel. I know they want him next season, but yeah, I think a few people even above Brighton's level at the moment might also want Ben White, so that could be an interesting one. Just generally on Brighton, what's your vintage, and what's your sort of like? I could talk for days on Ipswich circa 1996 to 2004 4 or something. What's your vintage with Brighton? What's your favourite team and a couple of players that we should look out?
Well, I guess my favourite season, 2010-11. It was our final season at the Withdean. So we knew that we had the new stadium coming. We won League One that year under Gus Poyet, but it was the way that we won it. We were incredibly swashbuckling.
Was Mauricio Taricco with him as well? Would he have been
Yes,
the
he
assistant?
was.
Yeah, Ipswich legend.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry,
Yeah.
go on, Kieran.
I'll
always bring it back to Ipswich, don't worry.
Absolutely. Glenn Murray was on fire that season. He was how we foolishly let him go at the end of that year. He'd scored 22 goals that season. We signed Ashley Barnes from Plymouth's reserves. Ashley got 20 goals. Inigo Calderon, our Catalan fullback, he was sort of a cult hero. Elliot Bennett, we managed to keep hold of him after he put in a transfer request in January. It was just an amazing season, but the quality of the football was out of this world for a League One team because Poyet had introduced this style of possession-based football, keeping it on the deck, everything that you're not used to in the lower leagues. We were scheduled to play 8 games in March, and we won all 8, and then finally to get promotion. With Liam Bridcut scoring the winner about 2 minutes from the end in a 4-3 win against Dagenham. It's classic lower league romantic football. So that, I guess, is in many respects my standout. And then the fact that we knew that we're going to the Championship, but we were moving to this amazing new stadium. And still, I've been going there for 8 or 9 years, but it still takes my breath away every time I get off the train. I can't believe that my little team is playing in such an amazing venue.
This is compared to the echoey running track around there. Yeah, incredible. Right, let's get into the let's see. I've let you talk about football for 3 minutes. Let's get into the nuts and bolts then. So you, as you always do, Kieran, your little kind of bite-size Twitter images. Of the, you'll tend to line up a whole league and be able to give us, a good context and comparison. So I guess it was probably a couple of months ago you put the Championship one out. Obviously, a lot of figures had dripped through, and we get our normal straggly owners who are late putting stuff in. But
Derby.
That one it was strange, that one, Kieran, because I've seen you put tons of these out. That one kind of went semi-viral, didn't it? That, and you would argue, I'm just putting the facts out. Recently, 4 or 5 days ago, because a Brentford fan called me out on saying that Rotherham are the only team to make a profit. Brentford have put their results out, and this Brentford fan, Kieran, comments me and says, "Oh, Brentford have made a £20 million profit." And obviously, following you, I'm like, No, they haven't. This cannot be remotely possible. So off I go to the Brentford website, which says the Brentford FC Group recorded a 20 million profit in the year 30th of June 2019. Brentford's current financial year and the outlook for the coming year should be reviewed in the context of the COVID-19 environment. In addition, the figures reported include 13.7 million of book profits relating to the transfer of land to develop the building of our new stadium. The entire effect of the land transactions, both positive and negative, I suppose that bracket is the key thing there, will be reflected in subsequent years. Look, we're both big fans of Brentford. I know that. Just if you can talk generally about Brentford, who have been the one with no parachute payments, low attendances, ducking and a diving, as Harry Redknapp would say in the transfer market. If you can talk in general about Brentford, but specifically about how they can put on their website a £20 million profit when nobody else can get remotely even near a £1 profit.
Right. Well, first of all, Brentford didn't make a £20 million profit from running Brentford as a football club. They actually lost 20 million. In terms of their day-to-day activities, in terms of selling tickets, selling broadcasting rights, having front of shirt sponsors, advertising, having people in the director's box as guests and all that type of stuff, they lost £20 million last season. But there are a variety of ways of addressing that, one of which is the owner putting in money, but that would never count towards profits. And the other thing to do is to sell off assets. So what Brentford have done is that they've sold the land for development for the new stadium. That cost will come through because then they're going to have to effectively buy the new stadium back from the developer, and that cost will be included. So there's a little bit of sleight of hand in respect of that particular transaction.
So, Kieran, just to be really clear about that, when I drive out of London on the A4, A40, I can't remember, that plot, they've sold the land and there's some kind of deal to get it back over time.
Yeah, well, effectively, the developer is going to build the stadium on behalf of the club, and then Brentford will pay the developer. So whilst they sold the land to the developer then uses the land to build the stadium, which Brentford will then buy back.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So that reduced the losses by 13 million. So we've gone from 20 million to 7 million. And then what Brentford do, and this is where I think Brentford's B team model does really come to the fore, is that they are really good at selling players. They
call
sold
it Brentford tax.
That's right. Is it Chris Mepham they sold to Bournemouth?
Mepham, Konza, Mopai, all within about tens of millions they got for that lot.
Yeah. Well, certainly Mepham and Konza, they are included in the 2019 account. So they went to Mepham went to Bournemouth, I think. So because they buy cheap and they sell high, they make money. And what they're effectively doing is that they are their talent spotting is very good. They are very big on the data analytics side because clearly the owner he owns Smart Odds and an awful lot of analytical activity into skills which can be developed is used by Brentford, and they've got the advantage of taking these young men who've been rejected by the bigger clubs in London. I think Mepham originally came from Chelsea's academy.
Pass, yeah. I know. Yeah. Strangely, a guy I work with used to play with Chris Mepham. I mean, he actually knows him, so he's a West London boy. So yeah, he could have been at any of those academies down there.
So Brentford clearly like what they saw in him, and now he's off, playing Premier League football, and they've got 12-13 million in terms of that fee. So. But in terms of running the club as a business, if you do not sell a Mepham or something equivalent each year, Brentford would have lost £20 million. I think they paid about £137 in wages for every £100 of income that they generated. So you're already running the business at a loss. But their business model is to pan for gold, and they're very good at it.
Oh God, aren't they just? So they've reported that they've sold 7,500 season tickets. So presumably, compared to Griffin Park, their match day income and hospitality and that is all going to go up. What's interested me about Brentford, Kieran, is how it's gone from. And it was interesting you said about the rejection, because the classic one is Romain Sawyers, who was at West Brom. Off he goes to Walsall with Dean Smith, goes to Brentford, actually ends up back at West Brom. So, it completely goes full circle. What's interested me, and I'd be interested in your perception of the risk that they're taking, is it's not Romain Sawyers for £2 million anymore. They're now signing Brian Mbeumo for £5 million or Pontus Jansson for £7 million. So everything's going. They seem to be doing it very incrementally. I know you always cite Assombalonga for 15 million. There's no Assombalonga for 15 million. Where does the risk come in? Because surely there's a point where if they keep gently pushing, but they don't get promoted, there is some line of risk. However, superlative their recruitment's been thus far.
Well, it certainly is a risk, because if you are panning for gold, sometimes you don't find any gold. And these accounts don't include the sale of Neil Maupay, by the way. So he will come through in the 2020 figure. They have to find one good player a year and sell him off at effectively an 8-figure price, and they've been superb at it ever since they arrived in the Championship. So I think you've got to give a lot of credit to the strategy of the club, and also the people that they use to identify talent. It is Moneyball. It is the personification of the use of data within football to generate a return, and to date it has been successful. Yet they will be hurting at present because Matthew Benham's company is a gambling company, and with no sport, there's nothing to gamble on. So they are reliant upon the owner, and they're reliant upon player sales. I think one thing that was interesting in their figures this year is that actually they've managed to go and repay the owner around about £10 million, which is unheard of, given that they are also building themselves a new stadium at the same time. And I think that's testament to their ability to find players and sell them at huge profits.
Brilliant. And I suppose all the Brentford fans will be sitting there saying, no, it's Saeed Benrahma is sat there ready to go to, I don't know, Brighton, Aston Villa, anyone for another small fortune. And then, yeah, it's Kieran, as an Ipswich fan, when I see clubs doing 3 transfer windows ahead, I wish we could do it. I really, I really wish we could do it. We just can't.
Yeah. I think this might upset you as an Ipswich fan. Brentford's wage bill was 200 grand less than yours last season.
I was going to say it was pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Heartbreak, absolute heartbreak. There you go. Let's not get into the Ipswich minefield though. Kieran, I'm sure we've got questions on Ipswich, but can we go to the salary cap now? So this has come up a few times in the last week. Firstly, we heard from your friend, in fact, Peter Swan, starting a WhatsApp group for the League Two. I'll say no more. The League Two managers, and that it had been talked about from the lower league managers. They were talking, I believe, about a £1,900 per week salary cap for a League Two player, £3,500 salary cap for a League One player. Simon Jordan, I don't know your views on him, ever outspoken. I do find it amusing when Joe Bloggs, the taxi driver, argues on TalkSport with a guy who's actually owned a football club that he's wrong. But there you go. So Simon Jordan said on the radio, there needs to be a salary cap of 50% wage to turnover. That would save £395 million per year. I had a fun comment on my channel, Kieran, saying clubs asking for a salary cap is like an obese food addict asking Tesco not to put high-calorie food on the shelves. You know, it's their responsibility. We've had the example of the NFL having a salary cap since 1994, which is I tried to do some research, Kieran. I don't know if you understand it better than me, but I think there's a long algorithm, and then there's what's against the cap and not against the cap is very confusing. All adjusted based on the revenues of the league. Is a salary cap realistic? And is my commenter right to say, well, come on, just get. Why do you need a salary cap? Why can't you just run your books properly? What's your view and on those numbers for League One and Two players?
Well, Simon Jordan's comments intrigued me because there is a salary cap in League One and League Two. It's been in existence for quite a few years. In League One, it's 60% of wages on income, and in League Two it's 50%. So it already exists. In terms of the comment from your YouTube channel, I'm inclined to agree with the poster. It's the equivalent of a parent going to McDonald's with their 6-year-old child, and the child demanding 3 milkshakes, and the parent saying, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." You know it's wrong. But so just say no. It's not difficult. You know, if I go to my boss and ask for a 50 grand pay rise at the university, they just turn around and laugh at me and say no, and I go away. Just do the same in football. It's not difficult. So to have artificial caps, that is giving a complete cop out to the owners. They've just got to go and act in a pragmatic, sustainable, and responsible manner, and that way the wages won't get out of hand. But what we've seen in the lower leagues, in the EFL league, especially the Championship, where on average £107 in wages was spent for each £100 of income last season, and Reading stole the crown from Birmingham, which I never thought would be achieved. Reading managed 224, and they were 20th in the Championship.
Changed manager and had a relegation battle. Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily work. So I know what Simon's saying. I don't think he's done his research into the lower leagues because, as I say, the salary cap already exists. A salary cap also existed in the Premier League, but nobody, unless they're incredibly dull, i.e., me, actually reads the Premier League handbook when it comes out each August. And the handbook has said that you're only allowed to increase your wage bill by £7 million a year, plus any money you generate yourself. So
that's one player.
That's one player, exactly. But plus money you generate yourself. So if you get a new sponsorship deal, which is worth, it did exist. And what happened was that last July, the Premier League chairman voted to abolish it because it was starting to work. And you were having managers moaning that, oh, well, we want to go and sign this player, but we can't do because of the salary cap, blah, blah, blah. So the overseas owners, the billionaires, the oligarchs, the hedge funds and so on that own the Premier League, they just said, yeah, we want to indulge our manager. We're not interested in financial sustainability. We're going to scrap the wage cap. So League One and League Two have one. The Premier League had one, but it got rid of it. Now we come to the Championship, it won't work. And the reason why it won't work is that you've got clubs coming down from the Premier League on Premier League wages. And therefore, to have a hard cap, i.e. X £1,000 per week, can't work if you have... there was something in... I think Matt Law published in the Mail a couple of days ago. I'm not saying I'm a reader of the Daily Mail. I just get all football finance stories automatically come through to me. There are players on £3.5 million a year contracts in the Championship because they were signed in the Premier League. They turned down the relegation clause. The club caved in to the players' demands, and now we've got legacy issues. We saw that with Nikola Zigic at Birmingham City. He was in the Championship for 3 years on a £2.5 million a year contract. We had Jamie O'Hara sort of giving it the poor me routine when he was in League One with Wolves in playing in their reserves on a £2 million a year contract and things of this nature. So a hard cap, and by a hard cap I mean a limit per player per week, or an overall wage limit, simply wouldn't work in the Championship because the clubs would very quickly be in breach of contract. And those clubs who are in the bottom half of the Premier League, who are trying to recruit players to avoid relegation, the guys that signing would simply refuse to sign one, which said, oh, if you get relegated, you're going down from 50 grand a week to 5 grand a week.
Wow. Okay. Watch Kieran's mood change now as I mentioned parachute payments. we're going to do it again, Kieran. And I've done my research this time. I promise, and I've sent it to you ahead of time.
You have very, very complicated, yes. And I like complicated numbers, as everybody knows.
And I hope you're not going to rip it up like the teaser and say this is dreadful. So we've clashed over parachute payments before because I want you to tell me that they're totally unfair and that the reason Ipswich eventually sank from the Championship was their inability to compete against the 3 teams that came down and the millions and millions of pounds that came in. You said that they were a necessary evil. Just before I give you my proposal, can you reaffirm your position and can you speak directly to, I don't know, a Nottingham Forest fan, say, who believes his team are going over and above to challenge this season against West Brom on year 2 or Huddersfield, Stoke, whoever's got the payments. Just reaffirm your position on parachute payments and talk to the little people like me who think they're unfair.
Okay. Parachute payments have nothing to do with the Championship. Parachute payments to do with the Premier League. And Premier League clubs voted for them because should they be relegated and no parachute payments existed, you would go off a cliff face in terms of broadcasting income. So last year, Huddersfield made £96 million from TV money. If they dropped down into the EFL TV deal, immediately in the Championship, they go from 96 to 7 million. Now, they will have signed players on 2, 3, 4 year contracts who will be on Premier League wages. Now, I've got Huddersfield's pay details for last season. I stick that again into one of my little spreadsheets, and on average, Huddersfield were paying out just under £2 million per player. So you put that into a squad of 25 players, you've got a £50 million wage bill. If you've got £7 million coming in from the EFL TV deal, you're making another £7 million coming in from match day, and you've got sponsorship of probably 3 to 4 million in the Championship. Can you see we've got commitments of 50 million? You've got money coming in in terms of income of 20. It simply doesn't work. So the rationale behind parachute payments, it's nothing to do with the Championship. The Premier League do not care about the Championship. The Premier League are only concerned about having a product which is competitive. Now, if you are Huddersfield, Brighton, Watford, Palace and so on, you want to be able to go out and recruit players in the Premier League who will give you a fighting chance of getting some results against the big boys. So, yeah, if you think about it, Norwich beat Manchester City this season. My team, Brighton, we beat Spurs 3-0 at our place. We went to the Emirates and we won 2-1 at Arsenal. We wouldn't have been able to do that if we'd only been able to recruit players and say, well, we're going to offer you 50 grand a week in the Premier League, but if we get relegated, you're going to have to go and take a 90% pay cut. The players wouldn't come, and therefore the Premier League would be less competitive and it would make less money from the broadcasting deals. The reason why the Premier League is so popular is because it's reasonably democratic in that most clubs have a chance. I appreciate that this season, Manchester, or over the last 2 seasons, Manchester City and Liverpool have been playing a quality of football which I've never seen before in my life.
That's not been economic, has it? They've just been better than everybody else, haven't they?
They've just been amazing. But we've beaten Manchester United at home. The clubs like Chelsea and so on. There's always a good chance of beating them because is that my dog in the background?
You opened the door beautifully. Yeah, yes. I love it.
So parachute payments are not there for the Championship. They are there to allow the Premier League clubs, when they're in the Premier League, to make themselves competitive. And it's as simple as that. Therefore, when the club is relegated, effectively, think about what's the purpose of a parachute. It's to slow down your descent. And what it does is it slows down the descent from going from £100 million a year in TV money to the 7 million you're going to get in the Championship. It slows that descent over the 3-year period, which means that you can either sell those players if you think you can get rid of them, although the fact that they weren't good enough in the Premier League means that you might have a bit of a struggle. Again, we go back to Zigic, O'Hara and players of that nature. And it helps prevent the clubs going bust. Otherwise, what we would have seen is loads of clubs upon relegation going into administration.
Well, and I can speak from experience on this because the one year where your doomsday scenario happened was the ITV digital year, where effectively and guess who got relegated that season, Kieran? Because it was Ipswich, Derby and Leicester who all went into administration. Within Ipswich, it took them till February, but I think Derby. So so I can hear lots of Premier League fans probably nodding along and understanding, and probably Championship fans nodded along and understanding as well. Although I guess there'll be an argument of, okay, in making the Premier League more fair, you're making the Championship more unfair. And then I suppose the argument back is, well, we are the Premier League. Well, our responsibility is that way. My issue with it is, you've persuaded me over time that they are necessary, and obviously, you can't go from that revenue base to nothing. The contention with Championship fans is it's just the difference and the disparity. So I added this up, and you can tell me if this is complete bollocks. I had a look over the 2018-19, what was actually paid down, and could you split it fairer, was my example. So they're not going to pay any more money down the Premier League. It's just going to be split differently on my little model. And you can tell me if I'm in cloud cookie land, left wing utopia here, Kieran. But so they paid down 264 million in parachutes and 83 million in solidarity payments. I'm sorry if I'm out. I'm sure you might have different figures.
Correct.
Which is 347.7 million. I can see why you do this and not me. So the 3 relegated teams year 1 got 42 million each. So that accounts for 127 million of it. The 3 teams, and Sunderland did well here because they weren't even in the Championship to get the second payment. They'd already been relegated through. So the 3 year 2 teams got 34 million. That's Borough, Sunderland, Hull. I should mention it was West Brom, Stoke and Swansea with the year 1 teams. Remember, we're a year back. QPR was still on their golden 4-year deal, got 17 million. Villa got 15.5 million, which they, according to your figures, they probably gave most of it to Tammy Abraham, Glenn Whelan, and Jonathan Codger at some points of the season. Anyway, if the 347 million was split just completely evenly, so 24 teams, that would be 14.48 million each, which would screw the year 1 teams, probably the year 2 teams as well, because they'd be dropping down 28 million. But the rest of the league would all get 10 million pounds more. But I'm sure you're going to tell me that's not fair. So what I did was I ratcheted it, Kieran. So basically the highest 6 teams, i.e. the 3 relegated and the playoff losers, because that's one thing that really doesn't feel fair with the parachutes, is that Leeds can get so close, finish 3rd, get to the playoff semi-final second leg, and then you have a situation where they're getting 4 million solidarity against Huddersfield, who stunk out the Premier League, who then are going to get 10 times more than them. Anyway, I'm ranting. But if you gave the highest 6 32.5%, then the next 6 27.5%, the next 6 22.5%, and then the bottom 6 17.5%, you would have 18 million, 18.8 million, 15.9 million, 13 million and 10 million, as opposed to 42, 42, 42, 34, 34, 34, 4. That's the issue, Kieran, that people have.
Yeah.
34, 4. That's the. Am I in cloud cuckoo land? Please don't bat it into touch too brutally, but would that not be fairer?
It depends how you define fair. Yeah, I think that's the first thing we've got to decide, and that's a very difficult word to
actually
define.
Can I come back? Better for more teams is how I would define fair.
It would be better for more teams. Let's just wind it back to the Premier League. Whose money is it?
The Premier League's.
Right. Who votes on these decisions?
The 20 Premier League teams.
Are they going to vote to give themselves less money?
Stop it! No.
Right. Yeah, and fairness doesn't come into it. It's self-interest rules football. That's the long and the short of things, as we know. You've only got to see some of the debates taking place in the media about stopping League One and League Two, where you've got clubs in playoff places say, "Oh no, it's got to carry on." Darren McAntony at Peterborough, he's going, anybody that says anything negative in terms of there's a public health crisis, football's not important, he just bats that back. Whereas the likes of Andy Holt at Accrington is saying, I can't run a football club. We're in mid-table mediocrity. What am I supposed to do if you're going to tell me to go and play 10 games when I can't go up, can't go down, and we've got no money coming in? The business is going to go bust. So we've got all of these arguments taking place. Self-interest comes into it. It's the Premier League's money. Premier League owners are not going to vote for a system because you and I both know, anybody that knows at the start of the season, the relegation is probably 3 from 10, 3 from 11 clubs, and all of those. And my aim at the start of the season as a Brighton fan is, effectively, we need to get to 40 points. Being in the Premier League is pretty dull. You trying to get your aim for the season is to get 10 victories. You compare that to the Championship, no fun at all. So the aim of the Premier League is to preserve its clubs and those clubs who have been in it, and therefore it wants to focus the money being kept by those clubs themselves. I agree entirely from a democratic, from a sharing, from a socialist, however you want to describe it, from an egalitarian point of view, giving higher solidarity payments and reducing parachute payments has a lot of sense. But look at Sheffield United. They got promoted. Look at Huddersfield. Look at Brighton. Look at Watford. Look at Palace. Look at Burnley. All of those clubs were promoted to the Premier League in the past few years on the back of having no parachute payments. So I think the championship, and the reason why I love the champion, Leeds are there on the basis of just playing great football this season. I appreciate that West Brom and Fulham do have the benefit of parachute payment. West Brom and Fulham would have been, in my view, clubs who would be challenging for a place anyway. If you take a look at what I find more intriguing, it's not actually the Championship versus the Premier League that's the problem. It's the Championship versus League One. Who were the three sides who were promoted from League One last season?
Charlton, Luton and Barnsley. You're going to ask me who the bottom three are now, aren't you?
Yeah. And then you look at the likes of Barnsley, Millwall, Rotherham, Burton. These are we now have Wigan. We've now got our own yo-yo league, which it isn't the Premier League versus the Championship, because to get out of the Championship, to win the Championship, you need more than players on big wages, because lots of the players who are signed in the Premier League are completely inappropriate for the Championship. It's a different sport in many regards. You've got that grind of Saturday, Tuesday, which again, as a fan, I actually miss, because now, when Brighton haven't won in 2020, we last time we won was December. So you at least in the Championship, you'd lose on a Saturday, and I'd only go into mourning for 3 days, and then. Now I've got a whole week of misery. My poor wife and dog when I come home from a defeat, and then we got Liverpool away next week, so I might as well write that week off as well. Before, I think that certainly the money frustrates people. But if you take a look at the average number of points earned by those clubs who are in receipt of parachute payments compared to those who are not, there's not actually a significant difference, especially when you take into account the size of the club itself in terms of its match day income. So Newcastle, if they get relegated, well, they've got 50,000 Geordies turning up the following season in the Championship. That means that they can buy better players than Rotherham and Millwall and Barnsley and Wigan for reasons other than the parachute payments, because they've got other income streams which are much higher. So in an ideal world, would I like a far better split? And you spoke earlier about the NFL. The NFL is amazing. I would love the English football system to be the same as the NFL, because what happens is that all of the broadcasting money and all of the merchandising money is split evenly between the 32 teams. When it comes to match day receipts, 60% goes to the home team, 40% goes into a pool, which is split between all 32 teams. How socialist is that from the world's most capitalist sport, the world's most capitalist country? It's absolutely fantastic. Premier League club owners, Manchester United and Spurs and Liverpool, do you think they're going to vote for that?
No.
And that's the problem. Sporting integrity interests versus financial interests don't marry. The reason why Americans love buying English football clubs is because they can't believe the difference between the divisions, and also the difference between the top of the Premier League and the bottom of the Premier League, and the top of the Championship and the bottom of the Championship, because they look at the NFL and it is incredibly democratic. But the downside of the NFL, no relegation.
Closed shop, yeah.
It's a closed shop, and the aim is to make money. Whereas the aim of Roman Abramovich is not to make money. The aim of Sheikh Mansour at City, the aim of Mel Morris isn't to make money at Derby, which is just as well. I love you, Mel. There's a whole section in the book about Derby County's creative accounting, by the way. So their football in the UK, the owners are there because they're looking for trophy assets. They're looking for the glamour of, if you are the owner of Derby or Sheffield Wednesday or Barnsley or Sheffield United, the aim is to get promoted in the Premier League and then to be able to say to your mates, "Oh, I'm hosting Manchester United this week, and we've got Liverpool coming down in 2 weeks. Fancy a trip to my director's box?" It's all to do with ego. It's nothing to do with democracy. It's nothing to do with the fans either. It comes down to the owners.
There you go. So, in short, without me sounding like Kathy Newman versus Jordan Peterson, so you're saying, I think you kind of agree with me that it probably isn't fair. And I think you agree with me that there's self-interest, but I think where we differ is that I have hope that it might change, and I think maybe you're a bit more pragmatic that, yes, when you put it as bluntly as, do I want my club to have a big advantage after we get relegated from the Premier League as a voting Premier League owner? Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah, and it's pragmatism. You're the romantic in this conversation, Ben.
Oh, come on, Kieran. There's some romance in you there, as was documented on your podcast when you're. Just quickly tell that story about Valentine's Day. That some news dropped on Valentine's Day, and you couldn't take your wife out for dinner or something. Massive story or something. Was it Man City? Man City getting turfed out of Europe.
Yeah, somebody clearly had just been dumped at UEFA that day. So February the 14th at 6:30 p.m, UEFA announced that Manchester City were getting banned from European competition for 2 years, and that just I get a feed on all football finance stories from my phone. So you set up Google alerts and all that type of nonsense. So it came through, and I just thought this could turn awkward for me. And within 10 minutes, Sky had phoned up. Could I comment on the story for them? BBC News Channel phoned up. Manchester, BBC Manchester, the radio station started phoning up. So I was supposed to be going out with the Baroness, my lovely, gorgeous wife. And I said to her, I'll cook you a meal instead. And I managed to cook her a meal in between interviews, very, very quickly, which she was not impressed by. And then I finished on the radio, back on 5 Live. I finished at 11:30 at night. Went upstairs. I think it's. We don't have air conditioning, but it was that cold in the bedroom that I thought we did. So yeah, I put something out on social media to that effect. And to be fair to Sky, they phoned up and said, we feel really bad for this because we started this. So take your good lady, take the Baroness out for a meal, and we'll pay for it. So I am very thankful to Jim White for getting me out of a sticky situation.
To which you said, okay, right, we're going to Gordon Ramsay on a Saturday night. You're paying for the taxi, the hotel. There you go. A benevolent act by Sky just after we've talked about parachute payments, hey? There you go. Just quickly, Kieran, where are we with our FFP Naughty Step teams? Derby and Sheffield Wednesday have been charged this season. We don't need to go into the whys and wherefores. In fact, I would direct people to your podcast, particularly on Derby, because I remember you doing a good bit. I mean, in fact, I remember driving around the M25 listening to that, Kieran, trying to understand all the business of. Oh, have the EFL actually got this wrong? But there you go. Look, Kieran, I get a lot of fans on my comments. I say something like, oh, and we don't know how many points Derby or Sheffield Wednesday may be deducted. And they comment back and they saying, Ben, we've been charged, but we haven't been found guilty yet. Do they have a point there? And is there any precedent for charges being dropped?
Not charges being dropped, and ultimately, of course, we got habeas corpus, innocent until proven guilty. The accusations have been made by the EFL. You would have hoped that the decision would have been made by now because the charges were made a few months ago. What we have seen, however, is that the EFL appealed against Birmingham being mitigated because there was a second charge against Birmingham, and they were released, and the EFL appealed against that, and they've lost. The EFL appealed about, because it's all done by an independent tribunal. The EFL has also appealed against some of the deductions against the likes of Macclesfield and Bolton, saying they weren't severe enough. The EFL have lost those. And the EFL did charge the owner, chief executive, and I think the finance director of Sheffield Wednesday in relation to financial fair play, disclosure issues and things of that nature. And those charges were dropped fairly quietly last month. So that went up on the Sheffield Wednesday website. Funnily enough, didn't see it appearing on the EFL website. So I think that the fans of both of those clubs will take heart that it's not going to be a kangaroo court, So I think the feeling of both Sheffield Wednesday and Derby fans is that the EFL is judge, jury, executioner. It's not. The tribunal who make that final decision are independently appointed. They will look at the evidence. I happen to know the QC who's operating on behalf of Sheffield Wednesday. In my mind, and I don't know whether anybody has heard of this guy, it's a guy called Nick DeMarco. He was the QC for Queen's Park Rangers when he got.
Sounds like
when he
he's
got
from The Sopranos or something, Kieran.
Well, he is. I think his grandfather owned an Italian ice cream shop in Brighton.
Beautiful. There you go. Beautiful.
But Nick, in my opinion, is the football law version of Lionel Messi. If anybody can get these clubs off, Nick can. He knows his stuff superbly. I've had Twitter conversations with him. He's an incredibly professional guy, but he's also an incredibly good guy as well. So he will do his damnedest for his clients. So nothing is finalised as yet. I think that the case against Sheffield Wednesday has more in favour of it. If Sheffield Wednesday get off, I think Derby certainly will. If Sheffield Wednesday get found guilty, I think Derby still potentially have a chance. So that's where we are at present. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of the championship, but if a points deduction is given on the basis of paying 37 games or however many we're up to in the championship, clearly that's going to have a disproportionate impact upon the final league positions of those two clubs. Because if you think about it, if you knock 15 points off a team that's played 37 games, you compare that to 15 points of a club that's played 46 games, that potentially could have a far more severe effect. So, that might be even a case for some form of mitigation or some form of appeal should the rulings go against those two clubs.
What a mess. And you could get a points deduction and then avoided season, which everyone else will be up in arms and say, well, they got away with it. Oh, dear. There we go. What do you think the future of FFP is when we get back? Because everyone's going to be broke, and you're going to have somebody waving a big stick saying, "Don't make losses, don't spend." Do you think there's going to be some tweaks or some kind of? I take it there won't be FFP from March the 13th through this lockdown, but what happens with it going forward?
Ultimately, it's the decision which has to be made by the owners, because the EFL, like the Premier League, is a members' club. So at present, FFP is still in existence for 2019-20, and until we hear otherwise, it will be applied. Yet the thought of potentially losing clubs going out of business, which is a reality, because even post-pandemic, clubs haven't got money coming in and they've still got wages to pay. It does seem, to me, intuitively, it makes sense to drop FFP for this season and potentially next season. Let's just focus on having 92 clubs. Rather than the application of rules, which, if we're honest, the rules have proven to be farcical, given the nature of the transactions that clubs have undertaken. And my reservation has always been, and I think you're probably aware of this, is that I have taught a little bit of law in my life, and certainly the first thing I always say to people: for every rule, there's a loophole. The clubs have rich owners. They will employ smart accountants who will find those loopholes, as we have seen in the case of Villa, Sheffield Wednesday, Derby, West Ham, and so on. All these clubs which have started selling assets to mitigate financial fair play, as well as some of the other crazy stuff as well.
Brilliant. I've got one more, Kieran, and then if we can do a couple of Twitter questions, if you still got time.
Yeah, sure.
Amazingly, I'd written this before you mentioned that you like the NFL. I promise it's here on the thing. I've been kind of thinking that the biggest issue is the Premier League not caring about what goes on below them. So I've sort of thought about a Premier League 2 type thing for a while, that might be the way around bridging the gap between 100 million broadcast and 7 million broadcast, and can we just get something in between that stops that horrible cliff edge? So what do you think to a sort of Premier League going down to 16 teams, I'm not saying with the NFL style democracy, but you can imagine the kind of broadcasters and advertisers' wet dream of a Super Bowl Premier League final, can't you? On the TV the week before the Champions League final, might even do numbers near what the Champions League final would do in terms of ad rev and viewership and things of that nature. God, things of that nature. I sound like you now, don't I? That's shocking. And then maybe you go down to a 20-team second tier, which might still have, you mentioned Palace, Brighton. You might end up with Forest and Leeds and Villa and these big revenue generating clubs. Do you think that might be something that could actually save this issue of the cliff between the top tier and the second tier, and the only way to make the Premier League care about the second tier being the Premier League owning the second tier? What do you think?
Again, from a democratic point of view, I think it's got a lot of sense. What it would involve, of course, is some of the existing mid-tier Premier League clubs giving up money. So if the likes of Leicester, West Ham, and so on, who Newcastle, Everton, they make 120 million pounds a year from TV money. Now, if you say, well, we're going to come up with an alternative to this, and you're only going to make 80 million pounds, they go, well, we'd rather have 120. So yes, I agree. It would stop this cliff edge, but it would create another cliff edge, of course, between Premier League 2 and what the equivalent of League 1. And, as an Ipswich fan, you might not be particularly happy about that, because they might say, yeah, we'll do PL and PL2, and we're going to do it as a closed shop.
No one's coming in.
Nobody's coming in. We're going to do it NFL style. You, Sunderland, Peterborough, Burton. Yeah, you can see. So for every solution, and I'm not trying to be negative here, because I don't like these gaps. I think that they do encourage not inappropriate behaviour, but they encourage people to. Well, I describe it as twisting on 19 in the Championship. Whereby this is why the clubs are spending so much money on wages compared to income, because they're gambling. And the thing is, you and we're going to be supporting our clubs to the day we die. The owners, some of them would just walk away. So some of them, it's just a trophy asset. It was just a bit of a giggle. I'm a multi-millionaire. I'll go and buy a yacht, or I'll go and buy some racehorses, an alternative. This is my life. I went to Bury Town Hall last summer. I was sort of on the fringes of some of the people trying to save the club from Steve Dale. And I went to Bury Town Hall one night, and there were grown men who I would not spill their pint in a pub, those type. And there were grown men who were hard guys. They were in tears. They were desperate, because it is so central to people's lives. It is the community hub. It is this local identity for the town, the city itself. And that would be my fear, that if we had the PL and PL2, what's going to happen to anything below that?
Okay, no, that makes sense. I was just thinking the argument when you were talking about would then be between a Manchester United and a Chelsea and a Crystal Palace, as opposed to the other argument being between Crystal Palace and Brighton and Millwall or Rotherham. You just have an idea how that fight might be a bit different when Man United or whoever these behemoths are involved. Kieran, you've been so generous with your time. You got time for a couple of Twitter questions?
Yes, sure.
We'll rattle through quick.
Yep.
This is Name That Tune on Twitter at Austrian something around. Has the wage bubble burst? If so, how much lower percentage-wise will wages be in 2 years' time?
I don't think it will burst on a percentage basis, but what we will find is that income drives costs to a certain extent. So if you take a look at what's happened in the Championship, and this is since the introduction of financial fair play, is that the total income in the Championship since 2013, I think I estimated it went up by £250 million over 5 years, but wages went up by 270. So the income drives the increase in wages. If the income of the Championship falls over the course of the next 2 or 3 years post-pandemic, it could be that some form of social distancing is introduced into football when it returns, so therefore you can't have crowds of more than 6,000 attending a football match. We don't know what it's going to be, but there is the potential for loss of. We've got our 3 income sources. Broadcasting, we're locked into a long-term TV deal with Sky, so I think that's okay. Sponsors, loads of them, especially in the lower leagues, they can't afford to sponsor football clubs anymore. That's going to fall. Match day income, there's no way, in my view, that clubs can increase prices. So our attendance is going to go up? No, because lots of people won't be able to afford it. We're going to be hitting 4 million unemployed by the end of this year. Other people will choose not to go to football because they will, until we've got a vaccine, they're in vulnerable groups. So if you're a senior, if you're 70 years old, are you going to go along to Elland Road and stand in the cop there? It's from a health point of view, it's a very risky thing to do until we've addressed the health issues. So I think the income of the Championship is going to fall, and wages will fall on the back of that, but it will trail because you've got players in the Championship. You'd normally sign a 3 or 4 year contract. So if I was a player, I'm not taking a pay cut. Not unless we've got a billionaire owner who operates from some. You look at what's happened with Bristol City. Their owner has deferred. The players have agreed to a deferment, but not a reduction in wages. Is it Steve Lansdowne, the owner? Yeah. So the players have agreed to a deferment of wages, but they're going to get them in 3 or 4 months' time. The backroom staff are being furloughed, and the club is not topping up the wages. So they're getting 80% up to that £2,500. Anything else, tough. The players still getting 100%. They're getting it a bit later, but they're still getting it. So the players are protected. What I think we will see is that as contracts come up for renewal, the club will say, we can't afford to pay you on the basis of your old contract. And if we're honest, nobody else is going to pay you that level in the Championship because we're all in the same boat. So I think the wages will come down, but actually it'll be a relatively slow descent in the Championship. If we move into Leagues 1 and League 2, where everybody's on a 1 or 2 year contract, you will see a major fall in wages as a post-pandemic.
Interesting. We could do another hour on contracts expiring and how on earth that may or may not work. But quickly, one last one. This is Ray, City Fan TV. So this is a Man City fan asking about
I know
FFP.
Ray. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He asked, will it be amended? I think you've already covered that. Can new owners pump money into a club and still comply with FFP? I suppose that would be the Newcastle example. Do you want to take that one?
If we take a look at that from a Premier League point of view, Premier League clubs are allowed to lose £15 million over 3 years, but the owners can pump in further money to take that to 105. Now it's similar in the Championship. The clubs can lose 15 million over 3 years, but the owners can only pump in enough money to take that loss to 39. So if the Saudis come in and stick in 500 million, only the first X million would count towards FFP.
Interesting. So, in short, there's not going to be another Sheikh Mansour type
No, no.
craziness.
FFP was designed to prevent another Manchester City, not to stop Manchester City. It was effectively to create the glass ceiling.
One more. Matthew, I don't know whether he's a Norwich fan. He says, will Ipswich go bust?
Not if Marcus Evans continues to be as benevolent as he has done historically.
And just quick one from me, with Mike Ashley moving off. I do see parallels between Mike Ashley and Marcus Evans, where I like the way you describe it. Is he a good business football owner? Yes. Is he a good football owner? Maybe not so much, but yeah, I guess you're right. While Marcus Evans is around, Ipswich don't want to sound selfish when there's other worse things going on in League One, but having a cash-rich owner, I guess, is a bit of a luxury down there.
Well, yeah, I'd also say be careful of what you wish for. Take a look at what happened to Bury. They were sold for £1. Steve Dale came in. Take a look at Charlton. You think about the campaign by the Charlton fans against Duchâtelet, which was an amazing campaign, really well coordinated, really well thought out. Non-violent direct action. There's smart cookies involved. East Street Investments have come in.
Are you worried about that?
I'm very worried about that. That's on my fear list. Yeah, and I love Charlton. My uncle Tom had trials for Charlton in the early 1950s, old school grounds. Kieran, I like all clubs.
The spine of their team are all out of contract in June as well. Naby Sarr, Johnny Williams, who you'd probably know from following Brighton, and Lyle Taylor, and this ridiculous thing with Matt Southall as well. Anyway, we could have done loads more on Charlton. Kieran, you have been so benevolent with your time, just like Marcus Evans, aren't you, really?
I was hated as much in Ipswich as you.
Oh, no, just don't say be careful what you wish for, and then you won't be hated in Ipswich, but there you go. So when can we, if people don't know about the podcast, I'm sure everybody who follows me listens to your podcast anyway, but when's the next one drop?
The next one will be going out on Monday. It goes out on Mondays and Thursdays. The Price of Football. Pick it up from all good podcast distribution outlets, iTunes and Spotify and God knows what else.
And Kieran, is there going to be enough teams for us to have a conversation about in 6 months' time when we inevitably speak again?
Yes, there will be, because football's a bit like Freddy Krueger. Every time you think he's dead,
like
he
Keith
comes.
Richards, I thought you were going to say then.
Yeah, football is an amazing body in that, because it is part of the community, it has a habit of saving itself at 11:59 p.m. every time. So yeah, God willing, we'll be all there, but hopefully we'll all be healthy. And that's, we can't reiterate enough. Football. Carlo Ancelotti's comment: football is the most important of the unimportant things in life. Has never been truer.
Absolutely. There we go. So it is at Kieran Maguire on Twitter. How many followers have you got now, Kieran? Like millions?
About 42,000.
Unbelievable scenes. There we go. And you didn't think there was an audience for that book behind you. There we go. And it's The Price of Football, available from all good bookstores, and it is the Price of Football podcast. Go and check him out, and on various news outlets multiple times per week during the lockdown, no doubt. Well, things are going. Kieran, any quick last message to Championship fans?
It's a great league. You'll miss it. When you get promoted, yes, it's nice to host the glamour clubs. It's not the be all and the end all if you don't go up. I can genuinely say that. Yeah, I love being in the Premier League in terms of the people know who you are, because I teach all over the world, and that's nice. But actually, in terms of excitement, the Championship is where it's at.
There we go. Kieran, thank you so much. Usual from me, at Benjamin Bloom. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, wash your hands, and we'll see you all soon on the next video.